I'm Dave Schulman, Chest President, and it's my pleasure to welcome you back to another conversation with Chest leadership. I'm joined today by Alex Niven. Alex, thanks for coming, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
We start almost all of these with a conversation about your journey with Chest. Talk to me a little bit about your first involvement and kind of how you've moved up and then your current role.
Gosh, I submitted my first abstract to Chest when I was a third-year resident. And I think when I was a pulmonary fellow, Chest was very much the biggest organization that was on my radar because of the people that mentored me. And Lisa Moores and Tom Fitzpatrick, both names that are well known in this organization, were both folks that worked with me closely as fellows. And so when I was close to graduation from fellowship, I kind of asked them, how do I get more involved in Chest and contribute to the organization? And they gave me probably the best advice that I ever got, which was go to a network meeting in an area that you're going to be working, pay attention and listen to what's going on. And when they look for volunteers, raise your hand and do a good job with whatever they offer you. And so my first job, I was an ICU director in a relatively small ICU. So I joined the critical care network. I went to a network meeting. I raised my hand and made comments enough that people knew what my name was. And then when the steering committee call went out, I put together a statement that I thought was a good one. And somehow or other, I got a position on the steering committee.
You got a first try.
First try.
That's kind of unheard of these days.
Yeah, it wasn't as competitive to get into critical care now then as it is now. Yeah, so I sat there for a year on the steering committee, listened and tried to figure out if there was anything that I could do. And then, this is, of course, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. The call went out about 12 months later that each network had to have a web page. And everybody looked around and said, does anybody know anything about designing a web page? Alex, you're kind of a young guy. You can take care of that.
Called the internet.
So we designed a web page and they liked that. And so that actually became sort of a template for the networks for a while. And so I just kept on going from there. And it was a couple of years after that they said, gosh, we'd like to do some simulation at Chest. Does anybody here have any experience with simulation? And at the time I was an associate program director. I was in charge of our simulation program for the residency. So I said, well, I've done a little bit of simulation. And so they said, great, why don't you write a curriculum for an airway management simulation experience? So I wrote a curriculum. I got a little carried away. They said, this could be a whole course. And so that was really how I got involved with simulation in Chest. And from there, it was pretty easy. So I was chair of the critical care network and was lots of experiences there that we could talk about. But really, my next step after that was getting more and more involved in simulation, kind of growing simulation within our organization. Both as a faculty member, course leader, and eventually as chair of what was then the simulation subcommittee. And that gave me an opportunity to get involved in the education committee, chaired education, and now I'm on the board. So that's really my story in a nutshell.
There's a ton of great things to unpack there. I want to rewind a little bit to close to the beginning. So as a fellow, you had reached out to some of the faculty with whom you'd worked, and you wanted to get involved in Chest. I think these days there are so many other ways to get education, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you can get online education. There's other societies that do great things. What do you say to fellows, current, junior fellows, senior fellows, even junior faculty who are out? What's the value? What's your perceived value for them for being involved, not just attending the meeting, but to actually be more intimately involved in Chest?
Yeah. So I'll answer that two ways. So first of all, I think we are fortunate in our subspecialty to have a number of different professional societies that we can turn to. And I think each one offers something a little different in terms of the strengths and the opportunities that it has. I was always a clinician educator, doing a little bit of research as well. But I saw a lot of extremely talented clinicians and experts at Chest. And I also saw, some really great educational opportunities as a fellow. So I really enjoyed a lot of the fellows courses and things like that I went to. probably the thing that caught my interest the most was the incredibly talented faculty members. We brought these subject matter experts in to sit down and talk to fellows, and they were all so gracious and approachable, and they'd answer my questions. And so that was something that I really admired and I wanted to be a part of. And then, the educator in me really has appreciated just how creative CHEST has been as an organization. I'll get a little geeky here for a minute in terms of learning theory. Yeah, I know.
You get
Shocking.
geeky? I can't envision. Okay, let's take that down. That maybe I could see that happening.
Yeah,
right, so let's do it.
So how do adults learn, right? So first of all, as an adult, I'm going to learn something because I have a need, right? I want to learn it because it's confusing to me. I need to know it for my job. I want to take better care of my patients. And so I'm going to look for some sort of resource that's going to take me where I need to go so that I can be a better doctor, take better care of patients, right? The next part is, how do you deliver that information? Well, sitting in the back of an auditorium 1,000 miles away from the podium while somebody drones on a screen, I'd much rather sit at home in my fuzzy slippers, watching that on my iPad. What I really like about CHEST, and you and I have been involved in this now for over 15 years, has been the tremendous diversity of educational offerings that this organization has developed with a ton of effort and thought, all with a learner in mind. We started off with simulation, it was 2006 or 2007. We had a bed in the middle of what we then called the exhibit hall where people came by and practiced intubation, right? That was the very first simulation activity we did at CHEST. And then all of a sudden the next year we had like a whole room. And now we build a 29,000 square foot simulation center every year in the convention center and provide, literally 5 days worth of hands-on simulation activities in all sorts of different areas that people can experience. The intimate one-on-one conversations that brought me into CHEST to begin with world-class faculty turned into small case-based interactive discussions, right? We piloted that in Atlanta in 2012, no more than 30 people with no more than 3 faculty members, talking about different cases, clinical challenges, the stuff that we struggle with every day put in a clinical context, answering the questions that you just can't get out of a textbook, or easily through a literature search or up to date. You combine that with the interdisciplinary sessions that we put together when I was chair. It's sort of nobody practices in a vacuum as an individual anymore. So how do you blend the multidisciplinary perspective that comes with a tumor board or a multi-specialty interstitial lung disease session or interstitial lung disease discussion? Yeah. And then the other part that I think I've been really excited with over the course of the last 5 years has been looking at introducing other members of our interprofessional team. So you look at the Critical Skills for Critical Care course, which is our first simulation course dedicated to advanced practice providers. And what's so cool about that course is, since we're known for physician education, there's still a lot of physicians that come to that course. And so now you've got nurse practitioners, PAs, and physicians working in a high fidelity simulation environment, just like real life, and you know what? It's just pure magic.
And that's what I really love about this. I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with you, but there's so many people who just like, what if we did this? What if we did this? A few years ago, we did teaching simulations. Remember, we stopped doing it since, but we had a couple of scenarios where people who wanted to be academic clinicians would be sort of put through the ringer of a couple of sort of rigorous, like this could happen to you if you're an academic teacher scenarios.
I've drawn from those resources many times since we did those sessions because I think that they're incredibly relevant to our daily practice, and so I've used it in our division. So I think, again, that's what I like about CHEST education is it's so relevant. We work so hard to focus on the things that matter for practicing clinicians, clinician educators, and for that matter, physician scientists who spend the time in the clinical setting. I mean, there's a set of skills that you need there. I was thinking about probably the coolest story that I got from fairly early on in our airway management simulation course. There's all sorts of people that come from, all over really the world sometimes to come and join our simulation programs. And, I am regularly humbled by the practice settings that some people are in and find themselves in, and then come to us to basically leverage our education to make that practice setting better. So what I remember was a learner who was in a very rural setting in, I believe it was the upper Midwest, who found themselves often in an emergency department doing fairly high-risk intubations. And so was really looking for an opportunity to strengthen their skills, and just asked a ton of questions and was completely engaged throughout our 3-day course, sort of asking about all sorts of different things. So we actually corresponded back and forth after the course, with additional questions and things along those lines. And it was probably 2 weeks after we were done with the course, got a message from that individual that said, "Thank you," because I was in the emergency department last night. There was, a patient who was sort of super obese who came in, who was in respiratory stress, needed to be intubated. And all I did was basically use all the crew resource management skills that we talked about. I organized the team. We talked about a plan and a backup plan, and the intubation went beautifully. And I saved a life last night. And that's
awesome.
That's just something that puts a smile on your face. Now, another funny story that just came to mind when I was thinking about
there are more funny stories than we give credit for if you work here long enough.
Just to compare and contrast where we had come from the beginning of simulation at Chest to that. So I still vividly remember my very first airway course in our old building at Chest. It was the very first simulation course, full 3-day simulation course that Chest had offered. We put up temporary walls. We had at that time Medi simulators. We just bought a bunch of supplies and that were all over the place that we had to organize and all that stuff. So I got there early the day before. I organized everything. The rest of the faculty got there. We were going to practice for an hour and a half at the end of the day, and then we were going to be ready for the learners. We turned on all the computers and servers ready to go. And the server started smoking, and then everything shut down.
And that was not simulated.
That was not simulated.
Really
that was
smoking.
real life. So, I sat in a corner sort of trying to control my bodily functions for the next hour and a half, and nothing was working, right? So we actually left that night and went to dinner not knowing if everything would turn on the next day with 30 people, again, coming from all over the place. We had somebody who came from Israel for that course. And so the next morning was a little bit of a, little anxiolytic experience or anxious experience, and fortunately everything turned on and everything went great. But just to think about where we started and where we've come, it's just amazing.
I will say that somehow we always find a way to get it done. I won't enumerate them all here, but I remember we were meeting in Atlanta in 2012, and there was some. Fortunately, I live in Atlanta. I have a hospital system in Atlanta, and there were the vents that we brought weren't working, so we had to calibrate them, but we had no pressurized oxygen or pressurized.
Yeah.
And so thankfully my institution was kind. We actually brought the ventilators over to my institution, pressurized them, brought them back to the sim center.
Yeah, I mean, super, super exciting first days. And now here we are. I mean, I think I've lost count now, at least 15 or 18,000 people come through our simulation activities. I mean, we're the only society which is certified by the Society for the SSIH, the Society for Simulation in Healthcare, in terms of our simulation center. And it's just cool to see everything that this organization has achieved there.
So you've talked at length about education, understanding that no one knows the future with certainty. If you were to make a best guess, how does education evolve over the next 5 to 10 years in the professional education space like what Chest is offering?
I think we're actually at a really exciting time when it comes to education because of this crazy disruptive event called the COVID-19 pandemic.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah. So I think what we've done in the last couple of years is tripped all over ourselves to pivot to virtual. And we've delivered tons of virtual content in a variety of different settings. And I think we've been very effective with that. But I don't think that we've really been very systematic in terms of what works, what doesn't, and now how we translate into a hybrid environment. I don't think anybody has, because we've been making it up as we go on the fly. That's what the pandemic has taught us to do. Speaking as an individual, at my division, in my institution, my attendance has doubled since we became facile in the virtual environment.
Remote attendance.
And I think we've had that same experience in CHEST when it comes to our outreach with the international audience, especially. There's lots of barriers that we have in terms of travel and expense and time that limit access to the tremendous educational offerings that we have. The problem is that as soon as you start mixing a live activity with virtual streaming attendance, there's a huge risk of bad TV, And so striking that balance between preserving the high quality in-person experiences that I'm still going to argue are best practice, right? I mean, there's something about an interaction where I can see your face, I can read your body language, and I can ask questions easily without raising my electronic hand, that I think translates into more effective, knowledge, skills, and attitudes transfer, At the same time, I'm really reluctant to walk away from that leveling of the playing field in terms of opening all of these tremendous opportunities to a much broader audience, and also thinking about creative ways to deliver that content and measuring the impact of that creative delivery so that we can further refine, how we do this and how we do good business. There's so many different questions to answer with that. I mean, we were arguing last week about the chat box, right? Is the chat box a good thing or a bad thing? Because on the one hand, all of a sudden, people who never raise their hand and ask questions feel comfortable asking questions. You can provide, targeted references for things that are going on in real time. At the same time, as human beings, we constantly overestimate the ability that we have to multitask without getting distracted. And as soon as we get distracted, we stop learning. So lots of questions there.
What is the value of, I'll say, gamification of entertainment, gamification of education and fun in education? Because some have argued it facilitates learning and some have argued it distracts from learning. Do you have an opinion on this?
Of course I have an opinion.
How silly of me to ask. We haven't discussed it before. So what is your opinion on this?
So I think, honestly, and this will follow up on your last question a little bit as well, I think this is probably the biggest challenge of our generation, is thinking about how to take all of these new educational innovative deliveries and string it together in a way that makes sense. So, ironically, everything that we have done over the course of the last several years at CHEST in terms of bite-sized learning, infographics, gamification, and the list goes on, is in some ways the antithesis of what I thought about when I introduced interdisciplinary programs, which were in-depth, thoughtful, multidisciplinary, interprofessional experiences, right? But I think the reality is people don't want that right now. People want the quick sound bites. They only have 10 to 15 minutes worth of time to spend. And that's only intensified, I think, with the pandemic and the influences of the pandemic. What I worry about is how you string those 10 to 15 minute bite-sized chunks into a logical learning pathway that translates into taking better care of patients at the bedside. And I think, as an educator, as somebody who spent far too much time thinking about curriculum development and designing longitudinal learning experiences, I think that's the biggest challenge, is how do you integrate a game to keep people engaged and interested with, a one-on-one conversation with a subject matter expert, maybe a podcast, maybe a hands-on learning experience in simulation, and put all that stuff together in a way that translates into what really counts, which is I now have more skills and knowledge to take better care of patients and improve their outcome.
So there is an effective way to do it. I mean, I've seen.
What are the advantages of gamification? You have engagement, you have excitement. All of those things help focus and help knowledge transfer. You have variety, spaced reinforcement, and in some cases testing effect.
Yeah.
Those are all nerdy education terms that translate into better learning. So I think there's a real advantage to gamification. The question is, how do you integrate that into the bigger picture?
What's the right balance? What's the right timing?
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the educational benefits of participation in national, international societies. What about the non-educational benefits, the socialization, the collegiality? Can you talk a little bit about your experience there, and how do you, and is there a way to measure? Like, how do you show somebody who's interested in getting involved, like, actually there's this other thing that isn't what is first comes to mind with chess and other societies, but is really valuable?
So I think most people turn to professional societies primarily thinking about opportunities, professional opportunities, and career advancement. I think for any fellow, for any junior faculty member, they want to learn, they want to get updates, and if they want to get involved, they're looking for opportunities to advance their career.
Promotions and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that chess, just like any other medical society, provides ample opportunities for that. I think one of the things that I loved about chess and the networks was that I felt like those opportunities were more readily available for me at an earlier point in my career than perhaps some other societies that I belong to as well. I think what I didn't appreciate and didn't realize was how personally rewarding being a part of this organization is, because I just get to meet and work with just fantastic people. I wouldn't have met you if it wasn't for chess.
Well, I'm not sure that I'm a value add.
Well,
I appreciate you saying that.
We've been friends now for quite a few years.
Couple years.
Yeah, and I've learned a ton from you, and I made a good friend. And honestly, the friends that I've made that are going to be personal and professional colleagues for life, I need more than my two hands to keep track of. And so, great personal relationships, great career advice, great mentors along the way. I have no doubt that I would not have half the experience, the rich experiences that I have right now if it wasn't for this organization. Shoot, we went to China, we traveled around, we had a good time. I wouldn't have been in China if it wasn't for that experience that really chess facilitated. That was Chess World Congress, and then we just kind of figured out things to do after that.
And there have been an inordinate number of friendships that have stemmed from professional associations from chess. I agree. It is again. I would repay the verbal favor. I have learned a ton, both from you and from many others with whom I've worked here, and not just about like how to intubate somebody, but just like career advice, life stuff. It's very interesting.
No, I feel very fortunate that I have a long list of mentors, and the vast majority of those mentors either were engaged in chess or I met through chess, and that's made all the difference.
What's the last television show you binged, and watching a season or more over a relatively short period of time?
Oh, so it's the Last Days of Ptolemy Gray. This
was Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, on Apple TV. Oof, that was great.
What is it? I have no idea what it's about.
Oh, so it starts off, it's horribly depressing, right? So inner city.
No spoilers for those who haven't seen it yet.
Inner city family, this guy who basically is dying from dementia, living in horrible conditions, being cared for by his nephew, right? His nephew gets shot right after he finds a connection for an experimental drug that he gets, and all of a sudden Samuel L. Jackson's mind is back, but only for a short period of time. And his undisputed goal is he wants to find his nephew's killer. So
that's interesting. Cool. It has a little bit of Flowers for Algernon spin. I don't know if you remember that story.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
What music song, or what song will come on the radio and you're going to always sing along?
Well, so my family makes fun of me because I just listen to the same sort of Pandora feeds over and over again. And I guess I'll throw this out because you probably won't expect this. So I'm a big Red Hot Chili Peppers fan.
I can see that.
So that's the sort of the station.
They just have a new album. They just released a new album, I believe.
They just got a star on the Hollywood.
An aggregate star, one for all four of them.
Yep, you got it.
So, any particular song that kind of strikes as like, oh, this is the favorite of the Chili Peppers albums and songs?
So honestly, probably one of the reasons why I'm attached to them is Stadium Arcadium came out during my first deployment in 2006. So it brings back a lot of memories from Iraq. And so that's the reason why I listen to that. So I always sort of attach to those songs on the albums I go through. Singing along, I don't know. I'm not going to admit to that.
I won't ask you to do it here, I promise. I will ask a lot of things, but that's not. Comfort food. What's the food that just gives you happies?
Oh, gosh. So dessert is easy, brownies.
Any particular brand, or like things you'll make themselves? Not ice chocolate chips inside. Be a little bit more than just brownies.
The denser the chocolate, the better.
Okay.
So there's this cake that my dad introduced me to, which is I don't know if it's Austrian, but it's certainly European. It's called Sackertorte. It's basically a flourless, dense
it might be
chocolate.
Swiss or German.
Yeah. It's really dense, basically just chocolate cut in a wedge. That's it.
Now, do you make this? Do you make it? Do you purchase it?
I have no idea how to make it. Yeah. Come on.
Is there anything you make? Is there any specialty?
If I find it on a menu, I'll go out of my way to do it.
Okay. Is there a specialty? The kids like, oh, Dad's cooking tonight. He should make this. Is there a thing?
No, I can pretty much burn anything on a grill, and I enjoy doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing super exciting otherwise. My wife will always tease me about my big date food that I used to make way back when I was much younger than now.
When the rocks were soft.
Yeah. So chicken parm, that was, I thought I had that down.
But that's not insignificant. You have to bread your chicken, you have to fry it. I mean, that's not an insignificant amount of work. Like the sauce and cheese may not be much, but the cooking part.
I used to fancy myself as a cook. If I said something like that in public now, my wife would come after me because the reality is she does most of it now.
Got it. Movie that's a guilty pleasure, meaning you're flipping around and the movie comes on, and even though you've seen it 5 times, you're going to watch it at least for a while, even though you're not really proud to admit that you've watched it for a while.
Well, so I was just talking to Vic Test about this today. So the Bourne series.
Yes, the Matt Damon.
Yeah.
And then there was one I think later with Jeremy Renner. I can't remember. Somebody later took it over after Matt Damon.
The Matt Damon series is still what I sort of grew up with. I'll watch that over and over again.
Those are not great movies.
No, they're not. They're not. But
and there were like 4 of them, or like 3 or at least 3
of them, and then the new one. Yeah, but you wanted.
No, it's a good answer. Look, any good answer you give to that question is going to make you subject to at least some modest amount of ridicule. If not from me, then from people who will watch this and then later be like, "Wait, you're that guy who watched that terrible Bourne movie series."
The other movie that I will still just fixate on every time it comes on TV, and my kids give me all sorts of grief about this, is and this just gets back to when I was in the military. I love Patton, the movie.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, no. That's the old one. Your kids. I mean,
they're like, Dad, it's so lame. The special effects are dumb.
It's not there for the special effects. Didn't George Scott? I feel like he won an Oscar for that.
He did. Yeah. It was an amazing role.
All right, last question. TV show, or again, this may be the answer you would maybe give us the answer. TV show or movie from when you were young that you've tried to get your kids to watch, but the kids are like, "This is terrible." So I'll take Patton off the list.
Oh no! So I'm gonna score this up as a victory. First time I introduced my kids to Star Wars,
yes,
they were like, "Dad, this is so boring. There's no action, and the special
effects are terrible in retrospect." Yes,
because I introduced them to episode 4 first because I'm like, I saw the original back when I was 7 years old. You're gonna love this. It took introducing them to those early ones, like episode 1 through 3, and they loved all that stuff because of all the special effects, and now they're hooked.
So wait, so they didn't care for the original trilogy 4 through 6.
Yeah, they said
you then sold them the ones with the special effects 1 through 3, which our generation generally did not appreciate, and after that they were able to palette 4 through 6.
Well, so I started off with this. They said, "Peace out, Dad. I don't want to do that. I'm going back to other stuff." It took 2 years, and then I brought them back to it, and now they're hooked. So, yeah,
impressive.
The rest of that is absolutely correct.
So for me, that is some of the early Mel Brooks movies.
Really?
Yes, which I still think are funny. I mean, some of them are a little risque now in retrospect and don't hold up, but the kids watch it and they're like, "This is terrible." I'm like, Mel Brooks is a comedic genius. Like, this is terrible. And they will constantly joke about it. And they will complain to my wife, like, I didn't make them watch it. It wasn't like I stapled them to the couch, but they had no interest in watching it. Like, even Spaceballs, which I think is considered by many who are a little younger than us to be like, that's a solid movie.
Dark
They
Helmet?
don't get it.
Come
on. They do not get it. They don't get it. It's a different kind of humor than it is now. Thanks again. Always a pleasure, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me.